Fossilized beaches hold the secrets to a world without ice. These ancient shorelines are more than just geological curiosities. They are time capsules, preserving moments from an Earth that was radically different from our own. This journey to 30 of these silent witnesses will fundamentally change how you see our planet's history. You will learn to read the story of shifting continents and vanished ecosystems written in stone. How did a tropical paradise once exist in the middle of the American desert? What cataclysmic force left bathtub rings on mountainsides thousands of miles from the ocean? By the end, you will no longer see the ground beneath your feet as permanent, but as a single page in a deep and dynamic biography. Where do you think the evidence for our planet's greatest transformations is hiding in plain sight? Think of a paleo shoreline as a geological time machine. This is not just an old beach you might stumble upon. It is a line in the stone, a moment frozen in time, marking where a long-vanished ocean once kissed the land. These features form when an ancient coastline is preserved, perhaps buried under layers of sediment, pushed high into the mountains by tectonic forces, or left exposed by a dramatic drop in sea level. The result is a permanent record, a snapshot of a world we can no longer see. Geologists become detectives at these sites. They read the story written in the sands, studying the specific types of sediment, the fossils of marine creatures trapped within, and the very shape of the land itself. This evidence allows them to reconstruct everything from past sea levels and the movements of continents to the climate of entire eras. It is our foundational key, the tool we need to unlock the secrets of our first ancient shoreline, a place that catapults us back to an age of a single supercontinent and planet spanning shallow seas. This lush paradise is the Huon basin of Utah and Colorado, but the world it reveals is almost unrecognizable. 50 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch, this arid landscape was a vast subtropical lake system. Its shores were not barren rock but fringed with palm trees where crocodiles basked. The water itself teemed with fish, their lives captured in stunning detail. This is the Green River Formation, a shoreline frozen in time not by ice, but by layers of fine, delicate sediment that settled on the ancient lake bottom. It is one of the most spectacular fossil sites on the planet, a place where you can find the perfect impression of a fish, its skeleton intact, alongside the delicate veins of a leaf or the rare, ghostly imprint of a bird's feather. The secret to this incredible preservation lies in the lakes themselves. They were deep, calm, and stratified, meaning the bottom waters were often starved of oxygen. When a creature died and sank into these deep, still layers, there was very little oxygen to fuel decay or disturb the remains of scavengers. The body would be gently covered by a slow, steady rain of silt and organic matter, creating a protective tomb. This process happened year after year, season after season, leaving behind a geological record of astonishing clarity. You can see this history with your own eyes in the rock, which often displays thin, alternating light and dark bands. These are called varves. Each pair of light and dark layers represents a single year, much like the rings of a tree. The light layer is the coarse silt washed in during the spring and summer, while the dark layer is the finer, organic, rich material that settled in the calm winter. By reading these annual layers, scientists can reconstruct the climate of this lost world. The story they tell is of a warm, wet Earth, a planet with no ice caps at the poles. The American West was not a desert, but a lush, humid paradise. The Green River Formation sets a breathtaking standard for what a paleo shoreline can reveal. It is not just a line in the stone marking where water met land. It is a vibrant, living portrait of an entire ecosystem, offering an unparalleled window into a pre-ice age world. How could a place so full of life transform into the dry, rugged landscape we see today? The answer lies in the next chapter of our planet's story, written high in the mountains, far from any ocean. The transformation from a lush lake to a stark desert is written in the stone of the American Southwest. Here, the vast expanses of the Navajo sandstone hold the echoes of a different kind of shoreline, one not of water, but of wind and sand. The iconic, sweeping curves and dramatic cross-bedding you see in places like Coyote Buttes and the formation known as the wave are not abstract art. They are the fossilized remains of colossal sand dunes, a petrified sea of sand that once bordered a vast inland ocean during the Jurassic period, over 150 million years ago. Picture the power of ancient winds scouring the landscape and piling sand into mountains of shifting grains. These dunes were a dynamic, living desert coastline, their shapes constantly changing with the storms. Their preservation tells a dramatic story of flooding, of mineral-rich waters from that nearby sea seeping down and cementing the grains of sand together, turning a shifting desert into solid rock. This shoreline reveals a world of stark contrasts, where desert and sea existed side by side, a land dominated not by crocodiles and palm trees, but by early dinosaurs like the crested Dilophosaurus. The sheer, monumental scale of these preserved dunes speaks to the titanic forces reshaping the continent, a world where the drama was written in sand long before ice would ever grip the poles. How does a continent move from such a dry, desert world back to one of immense tropical warmth? The next shoreline holds that answer, written in the geology of a modern desert that was once a swampy, carbon-rich paradise. That vast desert coastline of sand gives way to a far deeper and more ominous world. The heart of North America was once cleaved in two by a murky, predator-filled ocean. This was the Western Interior Seaway, a body of water so immense it stretched from the Arctic all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico during the Cretaceous period. Its legacy is not written in sweeping sandstones, but in a dark, crumbling rock known as the Pierre Shale. Exposed across the Great Plains from Colorado to South Dakota, this formation was not the shoreline itself, but the deep, quiet floor of that vanished sea. Walking across these barren badlands today, you are traversing what was once the abyss, a place where terrifying marine reptiles ruled the waters above. The shale itself tells the first part of the story. It is a dark, finely laminated rock, splitting easily into thin sheets. This delicate structure points to a deep seafloor where the water was starved of oxygen. In this still, quiet environment, the skeletons of creatures that sank from the sunlit world above were not scattered by currents or consumed by scavengers. They were gently entombed in the soft, accumulating mud, preserved with breathtaking fidelity. This is why the Pierre Shale is a fossil hunter's dream, yielding the monstrous skulls of mosasaurs, marine lizards that grew longer than a school bus, and the elegant, long-necked skeletons of plesiosaurs. The seafloor is also littered with the coiled shells of ammonites, their intricate patterns fossilized in perfect detail, and the massive, dinner plate-sized shells of giant clams. This was a world utterly alien to the North American heartland we know today. The existence of this continent-spanning seaway is a direct testament to a planet in a profound fever. Global temperatures were so high that the polar ice caps had completely melted, pumping enormous volumes of water into the oceans. Sea levels were radically higher than they are today, so much so that they drowned the interior of continents. The planet was a greenhouse, and the Pierre Shale provides the hard evidence, the muddy bottom of a sea that should never have been there. It captures a moment of extreme warmth, a world of lush polar forests and inland oceans that stood in stark contrast to the icy cycles that would eventually follow. How does a planet transition from such a global hothouse to the world of ice ages we live in today? The answer begins with a different kind of cataclysm, one that left its own distinct shoreline high in the mountains of South America. High in the Arctic, the stark white islands of Svalbard hold a ghostly ledger of the Ice Age's retreat. Etched into the frozen ground, a series of parallel lines curves along the mountainsides, looking like a giant's fingerprints pressed into the earth. These are not natural contours of the rock. They are raised beaches, ancient shorelines lifted hundreds of feet above the frigid sea that laps at the coast today. Each one of these ridges marks a moment in time when the ocean stopped its advance, a permanent watermark from a world buried under ice. The story they tell is one of unimaginable weight and a slow, powerful release. During the height of the last glaciation, a crushing sheet of ice, thousands of feet thick, smothered this land. The immense burden was so great that it literally pushed the Earth's crust downward, as if the planet itself were flexing under the pressure. When the climate finally shifted and the ice began its agonizingly slow melt, that incredible weight was lifted. The land, freed from its icy prison, began to rise back up in a process known as isostatic rebound. It is a delayed reaction, the Earth's crust springing back like a memory foam mattress after you get out of bed. Each of these beach ridges represents a pause in that great ascent, a moment when the land stabilized long enough for waves to carve a new shoreline before it was lifted again, stranded high and dry as the rebound continued. Scientists can walk these ancient beaches like stairs leading away from the sea, dating the shells and organic material trapped within each ridge. By measuring their precise elevation and age, they create a timeline of the land's rebirth, calculating not just how fast the crust rebounded, but also the staggering volume of ice that once caused it to sink. These silent, stony lines are a direct measurement of the Ice Age itself, a record of the planet's colossal struggle between fire and ice. This elastic response of the Earth raises a profound question. If the land itself can move so dramatically, what other monumental shifts did the Ice Ages trigger? Our next shoreline reveals an answer on a truly continental scale, where a vanished body of water left a mark so vast it can be seen from space. Far from the icy stillness of the Arctic, another kind of shoreline staircase tells a story of a planet breathing in and out with the rhythms of ice. The Huon Peninsula in Papua New Guinea presents one of the most dramatic records of this planetary pulse, a colossal staircase of fossilized coral reefs climbing high into the jungle-clad mountains. Each massive stone step is the ghost of a vibrant, living reef that once thrived in the sunlit shallows, a direct snapshot of where the ocean surface stood during a warm period between ice ages. These corals are meticulous record keepers. They cannot grow in deep water and are rarely found far above the waves, meaning their very existence marks a precise, ancient sea level. The reason they now stand hundreds of meters above the modern coast is a testament to immense geological power. The entire peninsula is being pushed upward by the collision of tectonic plates, a relentless force that lifts these fossil reefs like an elevator, preserving each one as a new terrace. This creates a perfect natural laboratory. Scientists can walk this giant staircase and, by dating the fossil corals on each step, assign an age and a sea level to every warm interglacial period for the last several 100,000 years. The data paints a clear and powerful picture. With each swing into a warm period, ice sheets melted and sea levels rose, allowing new coral reefs to flourish. When the climate cooled and plunged the planet back into an ice age, the ocean receded, leaving the old reef high and dry, only to be uplifted by tectonic forces and preserved for us to find. The Huon Peninsula does more than just show us the high water marks of a warmer world. It reveals the speed of these changes. By analyzing the corals, scientists can measure how quickly the sea rose in the past, providing a critical real-world benchmark for how our own oceans might respond to today's warming climate. This shoreline is a stark reminder that the ground beneath our feet and the water at our shores are in a constant, dynamic dance, a partnership between the deep forces of the earth and the changing temperature of the air. If a single peninsula can record such global drama, what happens when an entire continent shifts its course, leaving a shoreline so vast it defines a nation? These rhythmic patterns in stone are a planetary clock ticking to the rhythm of the moon. Deep within Capitol Reef National Park in Utah, the Earth has cracked open to reveal its own history book. The massive tilted layers of the water pocket fold expose the Carmel Formation, a shoreline that was not carved by waves, but by the gentle, daily push and pull of the tides. Here you can run your fingers over flacer bedding, a beautiful, wavy pattern where thin streaks of mud are trapped between ripples of sand. You can see perfectly symmetrical ripples, like a fossilized fingerprint pressed into the rock. These are not the chaotic marks of a storm. They are the orderly, repetitive signature of a vast, shallow sea that breathed in and out with the moon, a place that was underwater at high tide and a muddy flat baking in the sun just hours later. This ancient tidal flat was a world of extremes. During the Jurassic period, a great inland sea covered this area, but it was incredibly shallow. In such an environment, the moon's gravitational pull had a dramatic effect. The evidence preserved in the Carmel Formation suggests something profound about our celestial companion. The moon was likely closer to the Earth, and its pull was significantly stronger. This created megatides, a dramatic flooding and draining of the coastline that would dwarf what we see today. The rhythmic patterns in the rock are a direct record of these powerful, daily cycles, a stone diary of the Earth-Moon relationship. This shoreline gives us more than just a picture of an ancient sea. It allows us to look up at the night sky and understand that the cosmos has a direct, physical hand in shaping our world. The gentle tug of the moon not only moves our oceans but leaves a permanent mark on the planet itself, a record of celestial mechanics written in sedimentary stone. How many other cosmic relationships are etched into the landscape, waiting to be read? This idea of a world shaped by immense, rhythmic forces finds its ultimate expression in our next shoreline, a place where the planet's own internal fire forged a coast of pure obsidian. The rhythmic pulse of the tides gives way to a story of sudden, violent release. Etched into the mountainsides of western Montana, a series of parallel lines scar the rock, looking like the ghostly bathtub rings of a giant. These are the shorelines of glacial Lake Missoula, but they mark something far more unstable than a steady sea. During the last ice age, a massive glacier acted as a natural dam, blocking a river valley and trapping an inland sea of meltwater. This was no ordinary lake. At its peak, it held as much water as Lake Ontario and Lake Erie combined, a towering body of water held back by a wall of ice. Each of those lines on the mountain represents a different water level, a moment of precarious equilibrium before the dam failed. The lake was a ticking clock. The immense pressure of the water, combined with the slow, relentless flow of the ice dam, created a cycle of catastrophe. The ice would weaken, then breach, unleashing a wall of water so powerful it is almost beyond comprehension. This was not a gentle flood, it was a cataclysm. The entire lake, with its volume of hundreds of cubic miles of water, could drain in a matter of days. The resulting torrent raced across the landscape with the force of a continent's worth of rivers combined. scouring the earth down to bare bedrock and carving the bizarre, scarred landscape known as the channeled scablands of eastern Washington. The shorelines of Lake Missoula are a direct measure of this terrifying cycle. Each lower shoreline marks a refilling of the lake after a previous rupture, a temporary pause before the next inevitable collapse. This site tells a story of a climate system pushed to its breaking point, where the delicate balance of ice and water could snap in an instant, reshaping the land in a geological heartbeat. The legacy of Lake Missoula demonstrates the raw, volatile power trapped within an ice age, a force capable of engineering a landscape in days that would otherwise take millions of years to form. If a single, temporary lake could unleash such planetary-scale violence, what other frozen reservoirs held the power to redraw the world's coastlines? The violence of a glacial flood stands in stark contrast to a shoreline of quiet, profound creation. Along the coast of Nova Scotia, the Joggins fossil cliffs rise from the Bay of Fundy, their layered faces telling the story of a world that gave birth to a new way of life. This is not a coastline of crashing waves, but the preserved remains of a vast, swampy estuary from the Carboniferous period, a time so dominated by lush, decaying vegetation that we now call it the Coal Age. This place is the Galapagos of the ancient world, a laboratory of evolution frozen in stone. Here, the shoreline was a tangled, humid maze of giant scale trees, their trunks towering over muddy banks where the earliest amphibians crawled. The true magic of Joggins lies not just in the fossils it holds, but in how they were preserved. The rivers flowing into this estuary would regularly flood, surrounding the bases of the great trees with soft sand and silt. This sediment buried the trees so quickly that their cores often rotted away, leaving hollow stumps standing like natural traps. Inside these stone cylinders, scientists have made some of the most important discoveries in paleontology. They have found the skeletons of the very first reptiles, tiny creatures that sought shelter in these stumps and were then entombed. These are not dinosaurs. They are the pioneers of a new world, the first vertebrates fully capable of living their entire lives away from the water, their eggs equipped with a protective shell. This single shoreline captures the monumental leap from an aquatic to a terrestrial existence. The cliffs themselves read like a calendar of this changing world. You can see the story written in the repeating sequence of rock layers. A thick band of coal represents the ancient swamp itself, the compressed remains of all those giant trees. This is capped by a layer of sandstone, evidence of a river channel cutting through the forest. Above that, you find shale, the quiet mud of the estuary floor that settled when sea levels rose and flooded the land. This cycle of coal, sandstone, and shale repeats over and over, a rhythmic pulse of sea level change and sedimentation that built this incredible record over millions of years. The Joggins estuary was a cradle, a place where life experimented with a new frontier, and the very ground beneath it recorded every success and failure. It shows us that the most dramatic transformations are not always born from cataclysm, but can emerge from the slow, persistent rhythm of a swampy shore. How does a world that nurtured such life in its steamy coasts eventually give way to one dominated by a single, relentless force? Our journey now takes us to a shoreline written not in sand or mud, but in pure, unyielding ice. These vast, shimmering salt flats of the Arabian Gulf are a shoreline in reverse. Instead of the ocean meeting the land, here the land is slowly, inexorably conquering the sea. These are the sabgas, stark and beautiful plains that stretch for miles along the coast of the United Arab Emirates. They are not carved by waves, but built by the sun itself, a chemical shoreline created by the relentless evaporation of seawater in an arid climate. When the tide rolls in, it floods these low-lying areas with a thin, warm sheet of water. Then, under the desert sun, that water swiftly vanishes, leaving behind its dissolved minerals. Layer by microscopic layer, crystals of gypsum and halite, our common rock salt, precipitate out of the brine and accumulate on the surface. Over centuries, this process constructs a thick, hard crust of evaporite minerals, a literal desert of salt that marks the boundary between sea and land. This is a shoreline of quiet, chemical construction, a world defined not by the force of water but by its absence. The significance of these modern sagas, however, reaches far beyond the Arabian Peninsula. They are a living key to understanding some of the most dramatic climate shifts in Earth's deep past. Geologists have identified nearly identical layers of rock, composed of the same gypsum and halite minerals, preserved in the geological record on almost every continent. These are the fossilized sagas, the remnants of ancient hyper-arid periods. When we find these massive evaporite deposits locked within mountain ranges or buried under prairies, they are telling us an unmistakable story. They reveal moments in Earth's history when vast, shallow seas were cut off from the wider ocean and left to dry up under a scorching, cloudless sky. These were periods of extreme aridity, where evaporation rates vastly outpaced rainfall, causing the seas to retreat and leave behind immense, barren mineral deserts. The very ground beneath our feet in places far from any modern desert can be composed of the crystallized remains of a vanished ocean, a direct testament to a planet gripped by heat. This chemical shoreline offers a profound lesson. It shows us that the boundaries of our world are not fixed by physical force alone, but are also shaped by the delicate and powerful balance of the atmosphere. A shift in that balance can transform a thriving marine coast into a crystalline wasteland, preserving a story of climatic extremes in a layer of pure salt. What other radical transformations has our planet undergone? And where is the evidence of those lost worlds hiding today? A chemical treasure buried in the deserts of Morocco holds the story of an ocean gone mad with life. The vast, open-pit mines of the Kaurabga region tear open the earth to reveal a strange, dark rock that is neither sand nor mud. This is phosphorite, a mineral formed from the concentrated remains of countless marine creatures that thrived along an ancient coast tens of millions of years ago. This shoreline was not defined by pounding waves, but by an invisible, upward surge of water. It was a place of oceanic upwelling where deep, cold currents, rich with dissolved nutrients from the ocean floor, were forced to the surface by the continental shelf. This constant fertilization of the sunlit waters triggered explosive blooms of microscopic life. Tiny plankton and other marine organisms feasted on this nutrient soup, absorbing vast quantities of phosphorus into their tiny bodies. When they died, this rain of organic matter sank into the dark, quiet depths of the seafloor. There, in oxygen-poor conditions that slowed decay, their phosphorus-rich skeletons and soft tissues accumulated into thick, organic oozes. Over millions of years, the immense pressure of overlying sediments and subtle chemical reactions transformed this biological soup into the solid phosphorite rock we mine today. This entire process required a very specific planetary recipe. The formation of these immense deposits points to a warmer world with a different ocean circulation, a time before the large-scale ice ages of the Northern Hemisphere began to chill the globe. The Moroccan Phosphorites are more than just a vital source of fertilizer for our modern world. They are a direct measurement of the Earth's ancient metabolism, a record of a time when the planet's nutrient cycles ran in overdrive, locking away the breath of the ocean in stone. How does a world of such vibrant, teeming coastal life eventually surrender to the cold? the transition begins with a different kind of shoreline, one written not in life, but in the slow, grinding death of a continent. Deep beneath the modern state of Florida, a forest of stone reaches up through the limestone. The Avon Park Formation holds a secret not written in sand or shale, but in the intricate, calcified remains of ancient mangrove roots. These are rhizolyths, ghostly white casts of a root system that once gripped the muddy bottom of a shallow, warm sea. They are not impressions or fossils of wood, but something more ethereal. As the original roots decayed, the empty spaces they left behind were slowly filled with mineral-rich water, which precipitated out calcite, creating a perfect, stony replica of the living structure. The result is a petrified labyrinth, a three-dimensional snapshot of an entire coastal ecosystem frozen in time. This was not a turbulent coastline, but a tranquil, protected shoreline where fine sediments could settle gently, preserving these delicate structures without disturbance. The very existence of this fossilized mangrove forest is a powerful climate statement. Mangroves are fussy plants. They only thrive in frost-free, subtropical to tropical waters, and they are exquisitely tuned to specific sea levels, growing only in the narrow intertidal zone where saltwater meets land. Their presence here, in the heart of a peninsula now known for its retirement communities and orange groves, is direct biological proof of a planet running a fever. During the Eocene epoch, Florida was submerged under a warm, shallow sea, its climate far more like the modern Bahamas than the state we recognize today. This shoreline offers a tangible, beautiful connection to a greenhouse world, a time of stable, high sea levels when the poles were free of ice and the planet's thermostat was set permanently to warm. To stand where these stone roots lie is to stand in a vanished world of humid air and still, sun-drenched waters, a stark prelude to the dramatic climatic swings that would one day define our modern age. If a single root system can tell us so much about global temperature, what other living records are waiting to be unearthed, holding the key to even deeper mysteries of our planet's past? These stone roots of a vanished Florida give way to a shoreline of a different kind, one that predates trees, animals, and even complex life itself. In the remote wilderness of Western Australia, the Hamersley Basin exposes a landscape painted in deep red and metallic grey. These are the banded iron formations, a geological masterpiece of rhythmically layered rock that is over 2 billion years old. This is not a shoreline of crashing waves or sandy beaches, but a chemical coastline, a primordial record of the moment life itself began to fundamentally reshape the planet. The world's ancient oceans were a toxic soup, rich with dissolved iron that had seeped from volcanic vents on the seafloor. In the sunlit shallows of these seas, a revolution was brewing. The first photosynthetic bacteria had evolved, and as they multiplied, they began to exhale a waste product that was entirely new to the world, pure oxygen. This was a poison to most other life at the time, but it had a dramatic, global effect on the chemistry of the sea. Whenever this new oxygen mixed with the iron-rich waters, it caused the iron to rust, just like an old nail left in the rain. This rust, in the form of iron oxide particles, would then sink slowly to the seafloor, forming a thin, dark layer on the bottom. This process did not happen constantly. It was seasonal or perhaps tied to longer cycles. During periods of intense bacterial activity, the oxygen levels would rise and a layer of rust would settle. When activity waned or when the oxygen was used up, different sediments like silica would form a lighter, jasper-like layer on top. This cycle repeated for millions of years, creating the stunning, alternating red and gray bands we see today. Each band is a page in a deep time calendar, marking the slow, rhythmic breathing of a planet whose very atmosphere was being created by its simplest inhabitants. This event, known as the Great Oxidation Event, was the ultimate planetary transformation. It was the first and most profound climate change event in history, a chemical shoreline that records the moment life learned to harness the sun and, in doing so, rusted the oceans and cleared the air for a future it could not yet imagine. How does a world that has been so thoroughly remade by its own inhabitants then settle into a new, stable rhythm? Our next shoreline reveals an answer written not in chemistry, but in the slow, patient work of countless tiny architects. Those monumental cross-bedded cliffs of the Grand Canyon tell a story written by a relentless desert wind. The Coconino sandstone rises in pale, sweeping curves, its interior marked by dramatic, inclined layers that look like a stone avalanche frozen mid-fall. These are not the gentle ripples of a stream. They are megaripples, the fossilized remains of colossal sand dunes that once marched across a vast coastal desert during the Permian period. Each of those sweeping layers represents the steep slip face of a dune, the slope where sand grains would tumble down in a cascade, only to be buried and preserved by the next advancing wall of sand. The sheer scale of these preserved dunes is staggering, some of them standing as tall as a 20-story building. They speak of a world dominated by powerful, consistent winds scouring a landscape almost completely devoid of vegetation. This was the rugged interior of the supercontinent Pangaea, a place so far from any ocean that moisture rarely reached it, creating one of the most extensive deserts the world has ever known. Yet, the very existence of this sandstone tells a more complex story than simple aridity. The perfect preservation of these delicate dune shapes points to a sudden, dramatic change. These towering mountains of sand did not simply blow away. They were likely flooded by the advance of a shallow sea, perhaps driven by intense seasonal monsoons that surged inland from Pangaea's coast. The water would have saturated the dunes, locking the sand grains in place with mineral cements before they could be eroded by the very winds that built them. This shoreline is a record of a planet breathing in and out, where the boundaries between desert and sea were in constant, dramatic flux. The Coconino sandstone is more than a beautiful rock layer. It is a fossilized weather report from a world without ice, capturing the powerful atmospheric currents that circulated around a single, massive continent. How does a planet dominated by such vast, dry interiors eventually break apart, giving rise to the familiar coastlines we recognize today? The soft, blue-gray clay of Malta's coast holds a simple, elegant story of a rising and falling world. While ancient mysteries like the Cart ruts capture the imagination, it is this unassuming rock that offers one of the clearest geological records in the Mediterranean. The blue clay formation began as fine mud, settling slowly on a deep seafloor millions of years ago during the Miocene epoch. It is soft and easily eroded, a fundamental weakness that would later become its most important feature. When sea levels eventually dropped, wave action targeted this vulnerable layer at the base of much harder, overlying limestone cliffs. The relentless power of the water carved a deep, horizontal notch into the soft clay, undercutting the resistant limestone above and leaving it projecting as a dramatic visor or overhang. Today, that very same notch and its protective limestone visor stand high above the modern shoreline, completely dry and silent. This is not a subtle clue. It is an architectural blueprint of a vanished ocean, a precise line scratched by waves that no longer reach it. The elevation of this fossilized erosional feature provides unambiguous proof of just how dramatically the Mediterranean Sea has risen and fallen. These changes were driven by a dual engine. On a global scale, the growth and melt of immense ice sheets locked up and released vast quantities of water, shifting sea levels everywhere. But locally, the slow, relentless collision of the African and European tectonic plates has been steadily pushing the Maltese Islands upward, lifting this ancient watermark even higher. The notch in the blue clay is a perfect snapshot, a moment when the ocean paused in its relentless work, leaving behind a permanent signature of its presence. It demonstrates with stunning clarity that even the most stable-looking coastline is merely a temporary stage in an endless planetary drama. If a simple line in the clay can record such global forces, what other monumental shifts are recorded in the very chemistry of the world's most iconic landmarks? Beneath the elegant boulevards and iconic cafes of Paris, a feast from a forgotten sea lies buried. The very foundations of the city are built upon the Paris Basin, a gentle bowl of rock filled not with rubble, but with the remains of a vibrant, sun-drenched coastline. The limestone that underpins this capital of culture is packed solid with the fossilized shells of ancient oysters, a sprawling biological shoreline from the Eocene epoch. These are not scattered shells but entire reefs, layer upon layer of them, forming a petrified banquet of staggering abundance. They are the direct evidence of a time when Western Europe was submerged under a warm, shallow sea, a tropical appendix of the Atlantic Ocean. This was a world without borders defined by language, but by the gentle lap of water against a coastline that now lies hundreds of miles inland. The oysters themselves are meticulous archivists of their environment. Their specific species, the thickness of their shells, and even the chemical signatures locked within their crystalline structure tell a detailed story. Scientists can read these shells like a marine biologist's logbook. A certain thickness might indicate warmer, more acidic water, while the presence of particular isotopes reveals the precise temperature and salinity of the sea they grew in. The sheer density of these fossil beds speaks of incredibly fertile waters, rich with nutrients that supported such massive colonies of filter-feeding life. This was a coastal world of immense productivity, a far cry from the icy grip that would one day hold the poles. To walk through Paris is to walk over the ghost of a thriving tropical seabed, a direct and tangible link to an Earth that was fundamentally different from our own. The silent, stony shells are a humbling reminder that the landscapes we consider permanent are merely a temporary stage, and that the ground beneath the world's great cities was once alive with the quiet industry of countless marine creatures. How many other urban centers are built upon the remains of such forgotten worlds, their foundational secrets hidden in plain sight? The serene oyster beds of Paris collapse into a landscape of pure chaos along the California coast. The Franciscan Complex is a geological nightmare, a tortured jumble of rock where dark shale is entangled with blocks of greenstone and chert in a chaotic matrix. This is not a shoreline of gentle waves, but a deep-sea graveyard for the debris of the continent. Its story is told in turbidites, the rhythmic, repeating layers of sandstone and shale that are the calling card of unimaginable underwater violence. Picture a steep underwater slope, the edge of the ancient continent, suddenly giving way. A dense slurry of sand, mud, and rock would rip down the continental slope, accelerating into a turbulent, suspended avalanche known as a turbidity current. This underwater avalanche could travel for hundreds of miles across the flat abyssal plain. As its energy finally waned, the heaviest, coarsest material would fall out first, creating a layer of sandstone at the base of the deposit. Then progressively finer silt and clay would settle, forming a cap of shale on top. This creates a single, distinct graded bed, with coarse grains at the bottom and fine grains on top. In the Franciscan Complex, you can see this story repeated thousands of times, one graded bed stacked upon another, a library of catastrophic events. This is how the land itself was being buried at sea, the final resting place for sediment eroded from a distant shoreline. But the true violence of this place is not in the individual avalanches, but in its ultimate fate. The Franciscan Complex is a subduction zone mélange, a geological term for a mixed-up, chaotic paste of rock. This entire accumulation of deep-sea deposits was not destined to remain on the ocean floor. It was carried on a conveyor belt of oceanic crust, sliding slowly toward the edge of the North American continent. There, in a titanic collision, the seafloor was forced downward into the Earth's mantle, but these turbidite layers were too light to sink. They were scraped off the descending plate and plastered onto the leading edge of the continent, a process called accretion. The rock was shattered, folded, and mixed with fragments of ocean crust in a tectonic blender. This shoreline is a monument to the planet's endless cycle of destruction and creation. The continent was actively consuming its own margin, swallowing the ocean floor and regurgitating it to build new land. The very ground of California was forged in this violent frontier, a place where the shoreline was not a fixed line but a battlefield. How does a planet that constantly consumes its own coasts in such fury ever create a stable landscape? The answer lies in a shoreline that is not a line at all, but a vast, shallow kingdom built by trillions of tiny, patient architects. That violent frontier of tectonic consumption finds its counterpoint in a landscape of immense stillness. The Deccan Traps of India are a monument to one of the most catastrophic volcanic events in Earth's history, a place where continent-scale lava floods once scarred the planet. But nestled between these colossal layers of basalt lies a quieter, more profound record. These are the Lateritic Paleosols, ancient soils that are a shoreline not of water, but of time itself. They mark the moments when the volcanoes fell silent and the world began to heal. When the lava stopped flowing, the fresh, black rock was exposed to the elements. In the hot, wet tropical climate of the time, with its intense monsoon rains followed by baking dry seasons, the rock began to break down. This was not a gentle process. It was a chemical war waged by the atmosphere, leaching away soluble elements like silica and concentrating what was left behind, iron and aluminum. The result was a thick, rusty red soil, a laterite, staining the landscape like a scab over the planet's wound. Each of these fossil soil layers represents a pause in the global catastrophe, a breath held for centuries or even millennia. This was the true shoreline, the boundary between the solid rock of the planet and the living, breathing atmosphere that worked to reclaim it. These soils tell us something the lava alone cannot. They prove that even as the dinosaurs were vanishing, the climate of this part of the world remained stubbornly tropical. The planet's systems, though shocked by immense volcanism and the asteroid impact that would soon follow, showed a remarkable resilience. Life found a way to cling on in these intervals of peace, its presence hinted at by the very chemistry of the soil. The laterites of the Deccan are a testament to the Earth's deep, enduring rhythms, a reminder that cataclysm is always followed by a slow, patient rebuilding. How does a planet recover from such global trauma, and what new worlds emerge from the ashes of the old? Our next shoreline reveals an answer written in the most delicate of scripts, not in stone, but in the preserved memory of a single raindrop. These living fossils of the Bahamas are time travelers from the dawn of life itself. In the shallow, super-salty waters of places like Lee Stocking Island, stromatolites rise from the seafloor like miniature, layered mountains. They are not rocks shaped by chance, but biological structures meticulously built by colonies of cyanobacteria, the simplest of life forms. These microbes exude a sticky slime that traps floating sediment grains. To reach the sunlight, they must constantly migrate upward through the sediment they've captured, leaving behind a thin film of new organic material. This daily cycle of trapping and growing, repeated over centuries, creates the distinct domed layers of a stromatolite. They are the slow, patient work of billions of tiny, invisible architects. This very same process constructed the first coastlines on our planet. Ancient stromatolite reefs, like those preserved in the Gunflint Iron Formation of Canada, are not made of sand or pebbles. They are the fossilized remains of these sticky microbial mats, the earliest biological shorelines from over 3 billion years ago. The world they reveal is almost unimaginable. There were no crashing waves on sandy beaches, no crabs scuttling at the tide line. The shore was a vast, quiet, rubbery mat of microbes, a living skin stretching along the continents. The ocean was a strange, iron-rich soup, and the air was a toxic mix of gases, utterly unbreathable to us. Yet in this silent, alien world, a revolution was brewing. Those cyanobacteria, as they built their layered kingdoms, were performing a miracle. They were the first organisms to master photosynthesis, and in doing so, they began to leak a dangerous waste product into the atmosphere, a gas called oxygen. This was the beginning of the greatest pollution event in Earth's history, a chemical transformation that would eventually rust the oceans and clear the air for all future complex life. Modern stromatolites are our Rosetta Stone for this lost world. By studying how they grow and what conditions they thrive in, scientists can decode the stories locked in their ancient cousins. The presence of a massive stromatolite reef in the fossil record is a direct message. It tells us of a shallow, sun-drenched sea, a stable coastline, and a planet whose fate was being decided by the humblest of creatures. These microbial architects built the stage upon which all later life would eventually walk. How does a world ruled by such simple, silent organisms eventually give way to the riot of complex creatures we know today? The silent march of microbial architects finds a modern echo in the gentle, persistent work of the waves. Along the coast of South Australia, the Coorong Lagoon is a landscape in the slow, deliberate act of becoming a fossil. This serene stretch of water is not static. It is a modern shoreline actively being stranded, its past positions marked by a series of low, unassuming ridges that run parallel to the current coast. These are not made of stone but of countless shell fragments and clean, white sand, the accumulated debris of a living beach that has been left behind. Each ridge is a relict shoreline, a ghost of a former coastline, abandoned as sea levels have subtly shifted, and the land itself has experienced a gradual, gentle uplift. You can walk from the water's edge across these successive lines, moving backward in time with every step you take away from the sea. The Coorong is a living classroom, a clear and recent example of the very processes that, over millions of years, create the stone-bound paleo-shorelines we find locked within continents. It demonstrates with perfect clarity that you do not need cataclysmic earthquakes or violent floods to preserve a coastline. The simple, rhythmic combination of a changing sea and a slowly moving land is enough to inscribe a permanent record on the Earth. These shell beds provide the key for interpreting similar, much older features found far inland. When geologists find a ridge of shell-rich sediment 100 miles from the ocean, they now understand it was not a sudden, mysterious event. It was the result of the same patient, ongoing dance between land and water that we can watch happening today at the Coorong. This ongoing process proves that the story of our planet is not written only in grand, explosive chapters, but in the quiet, cumulative sentences written by the tide. If such subtle shifts can build a library of shorelines, what monumental changes are being recorded right now along the world's coasts, waiting for a future generation to read? The fossilized deltas of the old red sandstone are a river's final signature, preserved in stone. Across the rugged coastlines of Scotland and Norway, you can walk across the ancient floor of Lake Orcady, a vast body of freshwater that existed during the Devonian period. The rock tells the story of a river's journey in stunning, three-dimensional detail. As the river met the still waters of the lake, it would suddenly lose its energy, dropping its heavy load of sand and silt. This created a steep, advancing slope, a submerged cliff of sediment known as a faucet bed. You can still see these dramatic, inclined layers today, each one marking a single underwater avalanche of material tumbling down the front of the growing delta. Capping these slopes are the flat, horizontal topset beds. These are the fossilized river channels and floodplains, the very surface of the delta where the water once flowed freely before spilling into the lake. This is a complete shoreline ecosystem frozen in time, from the river's path on land to its dramatic deposition in the water. But this is more than just a geological structure. It is a critical habitat captured at a pivotal moment in the history of life. The quiet, oxygen-poor waters at the bottom of these deltas created a perfect environment for fossilization. Here, the remains of bizarre, armored fish like Cocosteus were buried and preserved, their articulated skeletons telling us of a thriving freshwater world. More importantly, this was the frontier where fish were first experimenting with life on land. The shallow, vegetated margins of this lacustrine delta provided the perfect nursery for the very first amphibians, creatures like ichthyostega, which were beginning to bridge the gap between water and solid ground. The old red sandstone captures life in the process of a monumental transition, all within a continent called Laurussia that was warm from pole to pole, a world without ice to dictate its rhythms. How did these early pioneers venturing from freshwater deltas eventually give rise to the rulers of a supercontinent? The silent chemistry of Mono Lake has built a shoreline of stone castles. In the stark landscape of eastern California, the tufa towers rise from the water like gnarled, petrified sentinels. Their forms are both alien and ancient, but their story is one of a delicate, ongoing reaction. These bizarre structures are not carved by waves, but grown from the water itself, a mineral precipitate born from the meeting of two very different kinds of water. Deep below the lake's surface, freshwater springs rich in calcium seep up through the lakebed. This freshwater immediately encounters the lake's main body, which is incredibly salty and alkaline, saturated with carbonates. When these two waters meet, a chemical handshake occurs. The calcium and the carbonates instantly combine to form solid calcium carbonate, the same mineral that makes up limestone. This mineral instantly crystallizes around the mouth of the spring, building upward, layer by microscopic layer over centuries. The result is a tower of porous, creamy white rock that grows entirely underwater, a hidden skyscraper of chemical architecture. For thousands of years, these towers remained hidden beneath the lake's surface, their growth slow and steady. Then, in the 20th century, the city of Los Angeles began diverting the streams that fed Mono Lake. With its freshwater sources cut off, the lake level began a dramatic plunge, falling over 40 feet. This human intervention acted like a giant pulling the plug, exposing the secret forest of tufa towers to the air for the first time. What we see today is a shoreline in reverse, a line of mineral monuments marking where the water used to be. The towers are not the ancient shoreline itself, but a brand new one created by the lake's retreat. They stand as a stark lesson in how quickly a living water body can be transformed into a geological exhibit, and how the most dramatic shorelines can be born from the invisible interplay of chemistry and scarcity. What other surreal landscapes are being sculpted right now by the hidden rivers flowing beneath the surface? These rhythmic layers of rock are a planetary metronome, ticking in time with the growth and death of distant ice. Across the vast Appalachian Basin from Pennsylvania to Alabama, the Earth has preserved a stunningly repetitive sequence. It begins with a layer of coal, the compressed remains of a vast, swampy forest. Directly above that lies a band of sandstone, evidence of a river channel that cut through the ancient trees. Then comes a layer of shale, the quiet mud of a lagoon or estuary. And finally, the sequence is capped by a bed of limestone, packed with the fossilized shells of marine creatures. This entire package, from coal forest to seafloor and back again, is a single cyclothem, and the story does not end there. The exact same sequence repeats over and over again, dozens of times, creating a towering stack of these rock cycles. Each cyclothem is the fingerprint of a shoreline in constant, dramatic motion. It records a single, complete pulse of the planet, a cycle of sea level rise and fall so precise it reads like a geological clock. But what force could possibly raise and lower the global ocean with such perfect, repetitive rhythm? The answer lies not in the tropics, but at the frozen poles of the ancient world. This was the pulse of an ice age. During the Pennsylvanian period, the continents were assembled into the supercontinent Pangaea, and the South Pole lay over what is now Africa. A massive ice sheet grew there, locking up immense volumes of the world's water in its frozen grip. This caused global sea levels to plummet, exposing the Appalachian region as a vast coastal plain where swamp forests thrived, creating the coal beds we see today. Then, as the climate shifted into a warmer interglacial period, that southern ice sheet would melt. The released water flooded back into the ocean, causing sea levels to rise dramatically. This transgression drowned the swamps, first under estuaries and lagoons, and finally under a shallow, tropical sea where the limestone-forming creatures lived. When the climate cooled again, the ice sheet regrew, the sea retreated, and the cycle began anew. The cyclothems are a direct physical record of these glacio-eustatic cycles, the changes in global sea level driven by the waxing and waning of ice. They are proof that our planet's climate has always been capable of radical swings, oscillating between greenhouse and icehouse worlds long before humans ever walked the Earth. These ancient, oscillating shorelines demonstrate that the ground we stand on is not a fixed stage, but a dance floor, rising and falling to the slow, powerful rhythm of a changing climate. A different kind of shoreline retreats across the vast emptiness of the Namib Desert. The granite spire of Spitzkop punches into the sky, an island of solid rock marooned in a sea of sand and gravel. Its base is not a sharp line, but a gentle, sloping plain of crumbled debris that spreads out from the mountain like a skirt. This contact zone, where the unyielding granite meets its own eroded remains, is a weathering front, a slow-motion battleground between stone and sky. This is a shoreline defined not by water, but by pure elemental decay. The forces at work here are patient and relentless. By day, the scorching sun bakes the granite, causing it to expand. At night, the desert cold makes it contract. This daily cycle of heating and cooling creates microscopic stresses, tiny fractures that slowly pry the rock apart. Then, on the rare occasions when fog rolls in from the distant ocean or a brief rain falls, water seeps into these new cracks. It carries with it weak acids from the atmosphere, which begin to chemically break down the hard minerals within the granite. Over thousands of years, this combination of physical stress and chemical attack transforms solid bedrock into soft grooves, a sandy debris that gravity and wind can finally carry away. The gentle slope surrounding the spire, known as a pediment, is the final resting place for this material, the beach of this weathering shoreline. It is a testament to a war of attrition fought over millions of years, where the mountain is slowly, grain by grain, being washed back into the desert from which it rose. This silent, ongoing demolition reveals a profound truth about our planet. The most dramatic landscapes are not always being built. They are also being taken apart, their forms sculpted by the delicate but persistent touch of the climate itself. If a single mountain can be reduced to sand by the simple rhythm of day and night, what does that say about the permanence of the world we see around us? The wind itself has built a shoreline along the Mississippi River. High above the floodplain, the lowest bluffs of Vicksburg stand as pale, crumbling cliffs, their steep faces a stark contrast to the flat, fertile land below. This is not sediment laid down by water, but by the sky, a monumental accumulation of dust that settled over thousands of years. The story of this silt begins with the immense ice sheets that once covered North America. As those glaciers advanced, their colossal weight ground the bedrock beneath them into a fine, mineral-rich powder known as rock flour. When the climate shifted and the ice began its slow retreat, it left behind vast, barren plains of this unprotected silt. With no vegetation to hold it in place, powerful winds sweeping south from the ice margin picked up these countless tons of dust and carried them aloft in continent-sized dust storms. When the wind finally lost its energy, it deposited this suspended silt across the Mississippi Valley, layer upon delicate layer, like a slow geological snowfall. These bluffs are the preserved front of that advancing desert of dust, the precise point where the atmosphere met the growing land. They are a fossilized weather pattern, a direct record of the cold, dry, and relentlessly windy world that existed at the edge of the ice. The very fact that these cliffs can hold their near-vertical shape is a clue to their origin. The fine, angular particles of loess have a natural cohesion, much like damp snow, allowing them to form dramatic bluffs that would instantly collapse if they were made of ordinary sand. This unique property creates a landscape that is both beautiful and fragile, a monument to the power of air to shape the earth. These silent, dusty cliffs are a profound reminder that the reach of an ice age extends far beyond its frozen frontiers, transforming entire continents with nothing more than the force of the wind. If the very air we breathe can sculpt such dramatic landscapes, what other invisible forces are quietly at work, writing their own stories into the stone? That same wind that built the lowest bluffs also swept across a vast, fertile plain that is no longer there. Beneath the cold, gray waves of the North Sea, a continent lies sleeping. This is Doggerland, a lost world that was once the thriving heartland of Europe, connecting Britain to the mainland. During the last ice age, so much water was locked up in ice that global sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower, exposing the floor of the North Sea as a sprawling, low-lying landscape of hills, rivers, and forests. This was not a barren tundra, but a rich ecosystem teeming with life. Herds of mammoth and reindeer grazed its meadows, and early humans hunted along its riverbanks, leaving their stone tools scattered in the soil. Today, the only witnesses to this vanished world are the fishing trawlers that work these waters. Their nets occasionally dredge up not fish, but dark blocks of peat, the preserved soil of the ancient land. Mixed within are the staggering remains of its inhabitants, the massive tusks and teeth of mammoths, the antlers of giant elk, and sometimes the carefully crafted flint tools of the people who called this place home. Each haul from the deep is a message from a drowned continent, a ghost shoreline on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. The story of Doggerland's demise is not one of a sudden cataclysm, but of a slow, inexorable drowning. As the Ice Age waned and the great glaciers melted, the sea began its long march inward. The water did not come in a single, terrifying wave. It advanced in pulses, creeping up river valleys, swallowing forests, and turning hills into islands. For generations, the people and animals living there would have witnessed their world shrinking, retreating season by season, year by year, until the highest hills became isolated archipelagos and finally vanished beneath the waves for good. This submerged landscape is perhaps the most poignant reminder on our entire journey. It is not an ancient relic from a distant geological past. Its inundation was a recent event in the grand timeline of our planet, a transformation that occurred within human memory and mythology. Doggerland makes the abstract concept of sea level rise terrifyingly concrete. It shows us that the maps we take for granted are not permanent. A change in global temperature can quite literally erase a continent from the map, displacing entire populations and rewriting the geography of the world. The silent forests under the North Sea stand as a solemn memorial to a world lost to the water, a direct and sobering parallel to the changes our own coastal communities may one day face. The gravel plains of Namibia hold a shoreline that is utterly invisible to the untrained eye. It is not a line carved by waves, but a chemical boundary, a hard, pale crust known as calcrete that caps the vast, open landscape. This is the fossilized echo of an ancient water table, a place where the earth itself was once saturated with life-giving water. In these arid regions, rainwater is a rare and precious event. When it does fall, it percolates down through the dry soil, dissolving tiny amounts of calcium carbonate from the minerals it passes. This mineral-rich water is then pulled back toward the surface by the relentless heat of the sun, evaporating at the boundary between the damp earth and the dry air. Each time this cycle repeats, a few more microscopic crystals of calcite are left behind, slowly cementing the loose gravel and soil into an increasingly solid, rock-hard layer. This calcrete horizon is a shoreline in the truest sense. It marks the precise, stable level where the water table met the atmosphere for centuries, perhaps even millennia. It was the frontier between the world of liquid water below and the world of dust and air above. The formation of such a thick, durable layer speaks of incredible stability. It tells us that the climate here was not always in flux, but experienced long, unbroken periods of aridity, allowing this slow, patient chemical process to build a shield over the land. This cryptic shoreline is now a guardian of the past. The very same calcrete layer that formed from a vanishing water supply now protects the older, softer sediments beneath it from being scoured away by the wind. It acts as a natural armor, preserving the very history it helped to write. These calcrete plains are a library of aridity, their pages written in calcium carbonate. They record the long, slow breaths of the planet, the cycles of drying that have repeatedly gripped the continents and sculpted their most enduring faces. This silent, chemical frontier makes you wonder how many other invisible boundaries are etched into the world, marking not the edge of an ocean, but the memory of its absence. Deep within the Geological caves of Australia, a different kind of shoreline is actively growing in total darkness. The stunning stalactites and stalagmites that drape these underground chambers are far more than natural decorations. They are speleothems, stone chronicles that record the climate above with the precision of a scientific instrument. Each drop of water that seeps through the limestone ceiling carries a chemical signature from the world outside. As it hangs for a moment before falling, it leaves behind a microscopic ring of calcite, adding another nearly invisible layer to the formation. The surface of a growing speleothem is a living frontier, a shoreline between the solid, permanent stone and the transient, information-rich water. This process is breathtakingly slow, often adding just a fraction of an inch over a century, but it builds a continuous timeline locked in stone. Scientists can core into these formations, much like drilling into an ice sheet, and read the layered history. The isotopes of oxygen trapped within the calcite layers act as an ancient thermometer and rain gauge. specific ratios tell researchers whether the climate outside was warm or cool, wet or dry, when that particular layer was deposited. Even the thickness of a layer speaks volumes, indicating periods of abundant rainfall that accelerated growth, or droughts that brought it to a near standstill. This creates a high-resolution climate archive stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, a detailed log of every ice age advance and retreat from a land-based perspective. While marine sediments offer a global view from the ocean floor, these cave formations provide a hyper-local report from the continents themselves, revealing how these global ice age cycles actually played out on the ground where plants grew and animals lived. They are the silent stone diaries of the land, proving that the planet's most vital stories are not only written under the open sky, but also in the deepest, darkest quiet of the earth. Beneath the placid surfaces of New England's lakes lies a calendar of ice, a silent countdown to the world we know today. The muddy bottoms of these lakes conceal delicate, paper-thin layers of sediment known as varves. Each pair of these layers, one light and one dark, is a single page in an annual diary, recording a full year in the life of a glacial lake as the last great ice sheet retreated northward. The story they tell is one of stark seasonal contrast. During the short, intense summers, meltwater from the retreating ice would pour into the lake, carrying with it a load of coarse, light-colored silt and sand. These heavy particles would sink quickly, spreading across the lake floor as a pale, gritty layer. Then, as winter's grip returned, the flow of meltwater would cease. The lake surface would freeze over, and the water beneath would grow still and quiet. In this profound calm, the finest, darkest clay particles, which had remained suspended in the water all summer, would finally drift down like snow, settling into a thin, dark blanket over the summer's sand. This perfect couplet, light then dark, was then sealed by the next summer's pulse of coarse sediment, preserving the record. This accumulating sediment surface was itself a shoreline, a constantly rising floor that marked the slow, steady infilling of these icy waters. By extracting cores from these lake beds, scientists can perform a remarkable feat of timekeeping. They can count these layers backward, 1 year at a time, just like reading the rings of a tree. This simple act of counting transforms a column of mud into a precise timeline, a year-by-year chronicle of the ice sheet's collapse. The very first varve in a sequence marks the moment the ice front retreated past that particular basin, allowing the lake to form. The thickness of each layer tells its own story, a proxy for the intensity of each summer's melt. A thick, coarse summer layer points to a year of rapid retreat and furious meltwater flow, while a thin, dark winter layer might speak of a particularly long and harsh cold season. This varve record is so precise that it allows geologists to correlate the retreat of the ice across hundreds of miles, matching the patterns in one lake to those in another, building a continental-scale understanding of one of the most profound landscape transformations in recent Earth history. These quiet, rhythmic layers at the bottom of a lake provide a resolution that mountain-sized moraines or vast outwash plains simply cannot, giving us a front-row seat, year by patient year, to the great thaw that sculpted a continent. What other quiet, methodical processes are recording the story of our own time, waiting for future generations to read the layers we are leaving behind? That slow, patient count of lake varves gives way to a far more dramatic calendar, one written not in mud but in pure crystal. The Castile Formation, buried deep within the Delaware Basin of Texas and New Mexico, is a geological masterpiece of stark, hypnotic beauty. Its cliffs are not composed of chaotic rubble, but of countless, perfectly alternating bands of creamy white anhydrite and dark brown calcite. Each pair of these light and dark stripes is a single year, a varve, but one born from a chemical sea on the brink of death. This was not a lake fed by glacial melt, but a vast, restricted inland sea during the Permian period, a body of water slowly being strangled by the assembling supercontinent of Pangaea. Cut off from the life-giving circulation of the global ocean, this basin had only one escape for the water that flowed into it: intense evaporation under a scorching, cloudless sky. The surface of this dying sea was a chemical shoreline, a place where the boundary between water and air was a factory for minerals. Each summer, as the heat intensified and the water volume shrank, the dissolved salts in the sea became so concentrated that anhydrite, a dehydrated form of gypsum, would crystallize out of the brine, forming a thin, white layer on the seafloor. Then, during the slightly cooler and perhaps wetter winter months, a different chemical balance would prevail, allowing a layer of darker, organic, rich calcite to form on top of the anhydrite. This perfect, rhythmic couplet was then sealed by the next summer's pulse of crystal, repeating the cycle year after year after year. The sheer number of these layers is staggering, suggesting this hyper-arid climate persisted for many thousands of years without interruption. The Castile Formation is more than a pretty rock. It is a direct visual measure of a planet gasping for moisture. It captures a world being squeezed by continental collision, where the interior of the giant landmass became a vast rain-shadow desert, and its lowest points filled with seas of brine that precipitated their own skeletons. This is the ultimate expression of a greenhouse world pushed to its arid extreme, a shoreline defined not by the lap of waves, but by the quiet, relentless fall of salt from a dying sky. How does a planet escape such a parched fate, and what new world emerges when the climate finally breaks? Our final shoreline holds the answer, revealing the very pulse that brought our modern Ice Age world into being. That silent, chemical rhythm of a dying sea finds its ultimate contrast in the stark, frozen silence of Antarctica. In the dry valleys, a landscape so alien it is used to simulate the surface of Mars, the ground itself is etched with a cryptic geometry. The barren soil is arranged into perfect polygons, sorted stones form winding stripes down hillsides, and the earth is buckled into low ridges. These are not the work of water or wind, but of ice. They are periglacial features, the slow, patient artwork of the freeze-thaw cycle. This is a cryogenic shoreline, a frontier not between land and water, but between the permanently frozen ground and the thin, active layer at the surface that dares to thaw for a few brief weeks each year. The process is one of relentless, granular sorting. When the moisture in the soil freezes, it expands, pushing larger stones upward and outward. When it thaws, finer particles wash down beneath them. Over countless seasons, this simple, repetitive action organizes the chaos of the landscape into these stark, beautiful patterns. They are the fingerprints of the cold, a direct measure of its intensity and persistence. The true power of these features, however, lies not in their modern existence, but in their ancient echoes. Geologists have discovered the fossilized remains of these very same soil polygons and stone stripes in the temperate farmlands of Europe and North America. Finding these icy signatures in a now mild climate is like finding a seashell on a mountaintop. It is undeniable proof that a deep, pervasive cold once gripped that land. These fossil periglacial patterns allow scientists to map the ghostly outlines of past ice ages with astonishing precision, revealing how far the cold reached beyond the glaciers themselves. They complete the global picture, showing that an ice age is not just about the ice sheets, but about a planet plunged into a deep chill, its very soil cracking and sorting itself in a slow-motion response to the cold. From the tropical estuaries of the Carboniferous to these frozen polygons of the Antarctic, Our journey across 30 ancient shorelines reveals a planet in constant, dramatic flux. These silent witnesses in stone tell us that change is the only true constant, and that the ground we stand on holds the deep, resonant memory of worlds we can barely imagine. These 30 silent witnesses form a single, unified testimony. Our planet's biography is not one of stability, but of relentless transformation. The very ground we consider permanent has been a tropical seabed, a vast desert of marching dunes, and the muddy bottom of a continent-splitting ocean. The consistent thread woven through these ancient shorelines is that our modern world, with its polar ice caps and relatively stable coastlines, is the exception, not the rule. For most of its history, Earth has been a warmer, wetter planet, where high sea levels drowned continental interiors and life thrived in climates that would feel alien to us now. The frozen epochs that periodically grip the globe are dramatic interruptions in a much longer narrative of greenhouse conditions. This grand tapestry of change, stitched together from fossilized beaches and chemical shorelines, presents us with a humbling and powerful perspective. The forces that redraw the world's maps are not confined to a distant past. They are the same processes that operate today, the slow dance of tectonics and the sensitive thermostat of the atmosphere. These stone pages from Earth's diary challenge our perception of a fixed world, reminding us that we are living on a dynamic stage where the next act of this planetary drama is always being written. Our journey across 30 silent shorelines reveals a planet in perpetual motion. The ground beneath our feet is not a permanent stage, but a dynamic manuscript, its pages written in fossilized beaches, raised reefs, and cryptic chemical deposits. Each one adds a sentence to the epic story of Earth before the ice, a narrative of resilience and radical transformation. These stone witnesses teach us about the profound interconnectedness of our world, where a shift in the atmosphere can rust an ocean, the tug of the moon can shape a coastline, and the growth of an ice sheet can build a cliff of dust a continent away. They show us that change is the one true constant in our planet's deep history. The next time you walk along a modern beach, feeling the waves wash over your feet, remember that you are treading on a temporary line. You are standing on the latest page of a much grander, ongoing story, a biography that is still being written. If this journey into deep time has captivated you, we invite you to subscribe for more explorations into Earth's greatest mysteries. We would love to hear which of these ancient shorelines fascinated you most, so please share your thoughts in the comments below.